My daughter called me every Sunday, without fail for 11 years, ever since she moved out to Berry with that man she married. Every Sunday, 7 o'clock, right when the evening news was ending. I could set my watch by it. So when Sunday came and went without a call, I told myself she was busy. Maybe they'd gone up to Wasaga Beach for the long weekend. Maybe little Nora had a fever and she'd forgotten. I left a voicemail, nothing dramatic. Just checking in, sweetheart. Call your old dad when you get a chance. Monday passed. Tuesday, I called her cell twice. Both times it went straight to voicemail. I called her work. She did bookkeeping part-time for a dental office on Dunlop Street, and the receptionist told me, politely but carefully, that my daughter hadn't been in since the previous Wednesday. They'd assumed she was unwell. That was the moment something shifted in my chest. Not panic yet. Just a door creaking open somewhere that you'd rather keep shut. I called her husband. He picked up on the second ring, which surprised me. His voice was smooth, almost relaxed, the way someone sounds when they've rehearsed being calm. He told me she'd gone to visit a friend in Sudbury. Said she'd wanted some time to herself. Said she'd taken Nora with her. I asked for the friend's name. There was a pause. Just half a second too long. He said he didn't remember exactly. Claire something. Or Karen. He'd have to check. I thanked him and hung up. My late wife used to say I had a nose for trouble. She didn't mean it as a compliment. She meant I worried too much, invented problems, borrowed grief from a future that never arrived. Maybe she was right, most of the time. But I stood there in my kitchen in Collingwood with the phone in my hand, and I knew, the way you know a storm is coming before the sky has done anything to warn you, that something was very wrong. My daughter's name was Lily. She was 34 years old. She had her mother's eyes and her grandmother's stubbornness, and the laugh that could fill a room without trying. She had a daughter of her own, Nora, who had just turned 6 in March and who collected smooth rocks from the shore of Georgian Bay and kept them in a shoebox under her bed. Lily called me every Sunday. She did not go anywhere without telling me. She did not leave her job without notice. She did not invent friends named Claire or Karen. I waited 2 more days because I'm a reasonable man and I did not want to cause a scene over nothing. That is the thing nobody tells you about getting older. You spend so much of your life trying not to overreact that sometimes you underreact at exactly the moment you shouldn't. Thursday morning, I got in my truck and drove to Berry. The house was a semi-detached on a quiet street near the park. Lily had loved it when they first bought it. She'd called me, practically giddy, talking about the backyard and the school district and the bay window in the kitchen where the light came in just right in the mornings. I'd helped them move in. I'd built Nora's bookshelf. I knew that house. From the outside, it looked fine. Car in the driveway, recycling bins out. A child's raincoat sitting on the front step. Just one. The left one, pink with white flowers. Nora's. I recognized it immediately. I knocked. Waited. Knocked again. Louder. Her husband answered. His name was Mitchell, and I had never fully trusted him. Not because he'd ever done anything specific, but because of the way he never quite looked at you when he talked. Like he was always monitoring something just over your shoulder. He was 38, good-looking in a careful way, worked in insurance. Ironic as it turned out, he seemed surprised to see me, not alarmed. Surprised, like someone caught doing something minor and embarrassing rather than something serious. I told him I wanted to see Lily. He said she wasn't back yet. I asked about Nora. Something moved behind his eyes. Just a flicker. He said Nora was with her mother. I said, then why is Nora's boot on your front step? He looked down at it. I watched him look at it. And I understood, in that moment, that he hadn't noticed it. That he'd been so focused on whatever story he was maintaining that he'd stopped seeing the details. Careless. That's the word. He'd gotten careless. He started to say something about maybe Lily had been back briefly, had grabbed some things, he'd been at work. I walked past him into the house. He called after me. Said I couldn't just... I heard him, but I kept walking. Through the front hall, past the kitchen, toward the back of the house where the bedrooms were. I didn't know what I was looking for. I only knew I needed to look. Lillian Mitchell's room was neat. Too neat, maybe. The kind of neat that happens when someone tidies with a specific purpose. Nora's room was different. The bed was unmade. A bowl with dried-out cereal residue sat on the nightstand, the milk long gone to a faint yellow crust. Her shoebox of rocks was on the floor, open. A few stones scattered like she'd been looking through it. A coloring book, open to a half-finished page. A garden scene, flowers half-colored and abandoned. She'd been here recently. A day ago. Maybe less. I stood in the middle of my granddaughter's bedroom and I called her name. Nothing. And then I heard it. It was faint. Just a breath of sound, like an animal trying very hard to be still. It came from the closet at the far end of the room. A narrow door with a little serried butterfly that Lily had put there the first week they moved in, because Nora had gone through a phase of being afraid of the dark, and they'd wanted to make the closet seem friendly. I crossed the room in 3 steps. I opened the door. She was sitting in the very back corner, knees pulled up to her chest, her arms wrapped around a stuffed rabbit she'd had since she was 2 years old. Its name was Clover. I knew that because I'd given it to her at the hospital, the morning she was born. She was wearing her pajamas, the ones with the little hedgehogs on them, and her hair was tangled and her face was pale and dirty streaked with old tears. She looked up at me. I don't have words for what happened to me in that moment. I've tried to find them since and I can't. 63 years on this earth and I'd never felt anything like it. Relief and terror arriving at exactly the same instant, like two trains hitting the same point of track. I said her name. Just her name? She said Grandpa. And then she launched herself at me, all 38 pounds of her, and I caught her and held on. I could feel every rib. I don't know how long we stayed like that. Long enough for me to get my breath back. Long enough for me to understand that she'd been in that closet for more than one day. She'd left herself water, a plastic cup from the bathroom, now empty, and a few crackers that had mostly crumbled. She had her rabbit. She had the shoebox of rocks. She'd organized them by size while she waited, smallest to largest, a line of them along the closet wall like a tiny careful calendar. I asked her if she was hurt. She shook her head. Then she pulled back and looked at me with those serious eyes she'd had since birth, and she asked me where her mom was. I told her we were going to find out. She nodded. She trusted me. That is the thing that has stayed with me more than anything else. She simply nodded and trusted me because she was 6 years old, and that is what 6-year-olds do when there is an adult in the room who loves them. They trust you to fix it. I had never in my life felt the weight of that trust as heavily as I did in that moment. I carried her out of that room. Mitchell was in the hallway. When he saw Nora in my arms, something in his face went wrong. Not guilt exactly. More like recalculation. The look of a man rapidly revising a plan. I told him very quietly that I was taking my granddaughter with me and that he should think very carefully about what he said next. He said Nora was his daughter and he had every right. I told him that when the police arrived, and they would be arriving shortly, he should have a very good explanation for why a 6-year-old child had been left alone in a closet without adequate food or water for what appeared to be at least 2 days. He stopped talking. I walked out of that house with Nora and I put her in the truck and I called 911. The OPP arrived within 20 minutes. A family services officer came with them. A woman named, I'll call her the officer. She was kind and methodical, and she sat with Nora on a blanket on the back seat of my truck and asked her gentle questions while her partner went inside with Mitchell. What Nora told that officer, in the simple and literal way that children tell the truth, was this: her daddy and another woman had taken mommy somewhere in the car 4 days ago. Nora had asked where they were going and her daddy had told her to wait inside. He'd locked the door. He'd come back once, briefly, and given her food and told her to stay in her room and not open the door for anyone. Then he'd left again. She'd run out of food. She'd been scared of the dark, so she'd taken her rocks into the closet because the butterfly made her feel better. She'd been counting the rocks to pass the time. I had to step away from the truck when Nora said that. I walked about 20 feet down the sidewalk and stood there looking at nothing until I was sure I could hold myself together. The investigation that followed was handled by the OPP out of Perry, and I will say this about them. They were thorough and they were fast. Within 48 hours they had located my daughter. She was alive. I need to say that clearly, because for 48 hours I had not known, and the not knowing had done something to me that I am still, honestly repairing. She was alive. She was in a hospital in Aurelia, suffering from what the doctors describe as acute poisoning. She'd been given something in her food over a period of weeks, something that had accumulated quietly in her system, and then she'd been driven and left somewhere in the belief that she would not survive, or would not be found in time. She was found because Mitch's girlfriend, a woman he'd been involved with for over a year, a detail my daughter had not known, had gotten nervous and made an anonymous call. Turned out to be not quite anonymous enough. That call was traced within 6 hours. Mitchell had a life insurance policy on my daughter, $250,000. He'd taken it out 18 months earlier, which is apparently not unusual in itself, but combined with everything else, it told a story that was very difficult to misread. He'd been in debt. Gambling mostly, the kind that starts as an app on your phone and ends as a second mortgage you haven't told your wife about. He'd been quietly drowning for 2 years, and somewhere in that drowning he'd decided that the most efficient solution was my daughter's death. I've tried to understand that. I've sat with it in the quiet of my house in Collingwood for many months now, and I've tried to find some thread of logic I can follow. I can't. I don't think logic is the right tool for it. There are people in the world for whom other people are simply instruments, and the ones they're closest to are just the instruments closest at hand. That's the only frame that halfway fits. The other woman, Mitchell's girlfriend, cooperated with the Crown in exchange for a reduced charge. She had driven the car. She had helped carry my daughter. She told the court she hadn't understood the full plan until it was already in motion, and then she'd felt trapped. Maybe that's true. Maybe it isn't. The judge would sort that out. Mitchell did not cooperate with anyone. He maintained, through his lawyer, that my daughter had left voluntarily, that he didn't know where she'd gone, that he'd been trying to manage a distressed child alone, that I had illegally entered his home. His lawyer was good enough to delay things by several months, to file motions and counter motions, to make the whole process feel like it was being deliberately ground down to dust. But the evidence was not the kind you can file a motion against. There was the life insurance policy. There were the gambling debts, documented in detail. There were the pharmacy records. A substance had been purchased under a name that was not Mitchell's, but that connected with not much difficulty to someone who connected to him. There were Nora's words, recorded carefully by that OPP family services officer on the afternoon I brought her out of that closet. There was the anonymous call and the woman who had made it, who sat in a witness box and described in a flat and exhausted voice exactly what she had helped do. And there was my daughter. Lily recovered. It was slow and it was not easy, and there were weeks when I drove up to Aurelia every other day just to sit with her while she slept, because being there felt like the only useful thing I could do. She lost weight. She didn't have to lose. She had neurological symptoms for a while, tremors, difficulty concentrating, that gradually faded over the following months. Her doctors were cautiously optimistic by November, and by the following spring, she was well enough to sit in the courtroom and watch the proceedings, which she chose to do. She is a braver person than I am. The trial ran for 9 days. Mitchell was convicted on 2 counts, administering a noxious substance with intent to endanger life, and criminal negligence causing harm to a child, the latter count relating to Nora. His sentencing was separate, and I won't say what I hoped for, only what I believed was right. He received 14 years. His girlfriend received 3 years and probation. I know what some people will say, that 14 years isn't enough, that no sentence could be enough for what he tried to do, for what he put Nora through, for the 48 hours I spent not knowing whether my daughter was alive. I understand that feeling. I've sat with it myself, but I also know this. The morning after sentencing, I drove to the hospital where Lily was doing a final round of follow-up appointments, and we sat in the parking lot in the autumn sunshine, and we ate Tim Hortons sandwiches, and she laughed at something I said. A real laugh, surprised out of her, the way a laugh should be. And I thought, he does not get to take this. He tried to take everything. He did not get to take this. Nora came to live with me in Collingwood while Lily finished her recovery. She enrolled at the local school and she made 2 friends within the first week because she is her mother's daughter. She brought her shoebox of rocks. She arranged them on the windowsill of the bedroom that had been her mother's when she was young, smallest to largest, just like she'd arranged them on the floor of that closet. I asked her once carefully if she ever thought about the time she'd been alone in the house. She thought about it seriously, the way she thinks about everything. She said, "I knew you'd come." I said, "You did." She nodded. "You always come." I don't know what I did to deserve that kind of faith. I don't know that I deserved it. I only know that she gave it to me freely, and that it is the most valuable thing I have ever been given, and that I will spend whatever time I have left making sure she was right to give it. Lily moved back to Collingwood in the spring. She sold the house in Barry. She wouldn't have gone back anyway, but the equity had to start over. She's renting a place 2 streets over from mine. On Sunday evenings, the 3 of us have dinner together. Nothing fancy. Soup in winter, something on the grill in summer. Nora sits between us and talks at great length about whatever she is currently interested in. Right now it is wolves, and the evening light comes through the window and lands on all of us together, and there are moments where I catch myself just sitting there holding very still, not wanting to disturb it. My wife was right that I worried too much. She was right about a lot of things. But on that Thursday morning, when I looked at that pink boot sitting alone on the front step, and I knew that wasn't borrowed grief, that was something else. Call it 63 years of paying attention. Call it a father's instinct, or stubbornness, or whatever you need to call it. I just knew. And I went in, and she was there. I've thought a lot about what made Mitchell the kind of man who could do what he did. Not to excuse it, there's no frame that makes it excusable. But because I think understanding it matters. He didn't become that person overnight. He made small choices, one after another, each one a little worse than the last. He chose to hide the debt instead of asking for help. He chose to keep gambling instead of stopping. He chose to see Lily not as a person he promised to love, but as a problem he needed to solve. And then one day he woke up, and he was someone capable of poisoning his wife and locking his 6-year-old daughter in a house alone. That's how it works. Not to ask what time it was, but a long snow slide that nobody around him could quite see. Because he was careful and because we tend to assume the best about people we've let into our families. I'm not without fault in this. I had doubts about Mitchell from early on, and I said nothing because I didn't want to interfere. Didn't want to be the difficult father-in-law. Didn't want to project my worries onto my daughter's happiness. I've had to sit with that. I think the honest version of integrity isn't just about doing the right thing when it's obvious. It's about saying the hard thing when it costs you something. When I kept quiet about my doubts, I was choosing comfort over honesty. I won't do that again. What I keep coming back to is Nora, 6 years old, alone in that house, and instead of panicking, she organized her rocks, smallest to largest. She made herself a task because she understood, somewhere in that small, serious mind of hers, that the only thing she could control was how she spent the time while she waited. I don't know where she learned that. Maybe it's just who she is, but I've thought about it often since. Because there's a kind of quiet intelligence in it that most adults don't manage. The ability to stay clear-headed when things are frightening, to do the next small, useful thing instead of collapsing into the fear. Lily has that same quality. Her recovery was not easy, and she never pretended it was, but she also never stopped moving forward. There were hard months. There were days when I could see how much the damage had cost her, physically and in every other way. But she kept going. That kind of endurance isn't something you find because things go well. It's something you build precisely because they don't. She built it through things I don't fully know about, and she carried it through this. And watching her do it has been one of the more humbling experiences of my life. I'm 63 years old. I've made plenty of mistakes and I expect I'll make more. But I know this much now. Paying attention is not the same as worrying. Acting on what you know is not the same as interfering. The morning I looked at that small pink boot on the front step and decided to walk inside anyway. That wasn't overthinking. That was 63 years of paying attention finally being put to use. Nora told me she knew I'd come. I hope I've earned that. I hope I keep earning it.